The president's immigration legislation faces a rather uncertain future on Capitol Hill, but the White House is making the most of the positive news from Iraq. So joining me now to discuss the latest political developments and the upcoming midterm elections, we have Ed Rollins, former White House political director under Ronald Reagan, Miguel Perez, syndicated columnist with The Record in New Jersey, and Hank Scheinkopf, Democratic strategist. And gentlemen, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. Let's start with immigration, a big topic for this show, and a lot happened recently. Let's talk about Dennis Hassert, who said he wants to take a long look at the Senate version of the bill. We have some people saying this bill may not quite make it through. It has to be attached to a House bill to actually go to the House. Where do we stand on this, Hank?
Well, what he's doing is probably taking a long look at polls to be sure that whatever they come up with does not injure them significantly if it's to be reported out and voted on before the midterm elections. Issue in Washington today isn't what happens to the American people, it's what happens to the Congress. So anything that mitigates against that is going to be going in the other direction.
Are we to be as cynical as that, Miguel?
Yes.
Yes?
I think it's dead. I think the bill is dead, and I think it may be a good thing for those of us who want immigration, real immigration reform, a path to legalization for illegal immigrants. I think it's a good thing that it might be dead, and maybe after the midterm elections, if we have a few more Democrats in the House, we may be able to come up with something better.
And yet the House version was considerably tougher. This just leaves that stranded too, doesn't it?
It does. I mean, obviously the House version could still be picked up by the Senate and run as an independent bill, but that will not occur. I think this is a strategy to kill the bill for all practical purposes, and I agree with Miguel. I would hate to see them rush to try and put something through that's inadequate. I think this problem is so significant. I'd like to see the new Congress come back and spend 2 years focusing on this thing and really find out how many illegals are here, what their qualifications are, make a long-term commitment to them and to the security of the country. And I think anything short of that is irresponsible.
And yet, when Congress goes home, they hear this is one of the top pressing issues of the day. And yet there's this wait now on it. Can we wait?
Well, they can wait. And what's the top issue is still security. People want the borders secured. And you can argue that the Senate, my colleagues in the Senate or what have you, didn't let us do that. And I think the House are the ones that are really running and are worried about it. And obviously after the election in San Diego last week, where Bill Bray made his whole campaign on this issue alone, I think that's convinced a lot of Republicans not to touch the...
Security involves all illegal immigrants, not just those who are coming over the Mexican border. And we keep talking only about the Mexican border. Right. We should be concerned about terrorists coming through Canada. We should be concerned about illegal immigrants who originally came in legally and violated their visas. Almost half of the illegal immigrants in the country came legally and then overstayed their visas.
Right.
The bill in Congress right now does nothing to correct this problem. That's a terrible situation.
A lot of gaps in this legislation. Let's go to a poll, exclusive CNN Lou Dobbs Tonight poll on immigration. More than half of those polled say we should not allow people to vote if they cannot speak English. Do you agree with that?
I don't agree with that. It has nothing to do with being a Democrat or Republican. It wasn't so many generations ago when people came from other countries and probably had a lot of problems looking at that election ballot, couldn't figure it out, and language wasn't used as a discriminatory tool. If you're here, you're working, you're living a good life, you're obeying the rules, you're paying your taxes, you really ought to be able to vote, regardless of what your language is.
One of the arguments is expense. Do you think it's worth the expense?
It's not that expensive. It's not that expensive to come up with, just translate a couple of documents. But again, if these people are here legally and they're citizens, they must know a little English to begin with. That's how they became citizens. So it nullifies the question.
Yeah. I grew up in California. We've had the dual ballots for as long as I've been around, and I would argue very strenuously that we need to continue that. I would much rather have people be able to read correctly in their home language that they're most comfortable with and vote correctly for the people they want to vote for.
And participate. All right, let's look at another poll that we have done on immigration. 83% of people said that the police should be required to determine the legal status of someone they're arresting. What do you think about that?
Well, in some cities we have crime waves, although we're in a period now in America where crime is pretty low. When you have real things going on and there's a shootout, I think the last thing you want to find out is the person's legal or illegal status is their immigration.
Yeah.
Kind of ridiculous. Local police need to do what they do best, which is take care of local police issues, not worry about country of origin, whether you're an illegal citizen or whether you're an illegal immigrant or what the status of your green card or processes at that moment. Kind of ridiculous.
Although a shootout is an extreme example.
Well, doesn't matter. Average policeman in a patrol car, policewoman on a night shift may go through 30, 40, 50, maybe 100 calls for service, some of which they respond to, some of which they don't. shifted to other cars. I mean, they got other things to do.
Yeah.
You want an illegal immigrant to be able to call police, not to be afraid to call police. If your house is on fire and there's an illegal immigrant down the street, you want him to call the police. He won't do that if he knows that he's going to be arrested. That's the bottom line. If there's a disease spreading in your neighborhood and he has it, he's not going to go to the emergency service and everybody's going to catch it. So it affects us all. We have to be wary about these things. I think when these questions are asked, honestly, the problem is that people are not given both sides of the story. I think if they were told, listen, these are the ramifications of voting this way or going this way with this poll, then people would think about it.
Okay,
twice.
but guys, we've had a shootout and a house on fire already.
Well,
but,
let's put it in more practical terms. American people want leadership on the issue. They're not going to get much leadership. They're going to get a lot of discussion. Politicians are not going to do anything that puts their seats at risk or the present construction of Congress, depending upon your point of view. And that's the problem. Political leadership has to stand up and say, look, this is what we need to do. This is real. It's appropriate. And get working on it. At least have a national discussion. We're not having a national discussion. What we're having is something quite different.
The critical thing on this issue, there's been several raids in the last day or two. There are a large number of illegal immigrants. We think of the good people who work hard and do what have you. There's a large number who become part of the criminal element. And obviously, where they find out that someone has basically been part of a gang or part of thievery or done improper things, then they need to be identified. They need to be sent back home or imprisoned.
Immediately.
Okay, let's just talk politics for a second. President Bush spoke to reporters this morning at the White House. He talked about his confidence in the future of the Republican Party. Let's hear what he had to say.
And I believe we're going to hold the House and the Senate because our philosophy is one that is forward-looking and optimistic and has worked. We got a record to run on.
What do you think about that?
He sure does have a record to run on, and if midterm elections are any indication of the popularity of the incumbent the president at a particular time, based upon his public opinion poll numbers, we know them very well, he certainly will be called to question on the record, and his fellow Republicans will also be called to question on his record.
Mm-hmm. Miguel?
I hope he's wrong. I hope the House is not held by the Republicans because, again, going back to immigration, I think we need a Democratic majority that will be more sensible to the problem of illegal immigration.
The president said the best week he's had in probably 2 years, but 1 week does not make an election cycle, and I think that it's still a 50-50 chance that Republicans could lose the House, a little less the Senate.
All right. On that note, thanks very much, Hank Scheinkoff, Ed Rollins, and Miguel Perez. Thank you, gentlemen. And a reminder now to vote in tonight's poll. Do you believe the ballots for U.S. elections should be offered in a language other than English? Yes or no? Cast your vote at LouDobbs.com, and we'll bring you the results in just a few minutes. And coming up next, he's been slapped with a discrimination complaint, but the owner of Geno's Cheesesteaks is sticking to his motto, "This is America, speak English."